And I'm going to call the Hamilton Planning Board's July 25th, 2023 meeting to order. Welcome everyone here in the audience and anyone who's attending here on Zoom. We have a full schedule this evening, so I want to be sure that we end our discussions with respect to Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary and board business before 8 o'clock, because at that point, the planning board will be going into executive session. So at this point, I will take roll call. So when I call your name, would you please indicate that you're present? Pat Norton?
Present.
Jonathan Poor?
Jonathan Poor, present.
Bill Wheaton?
Bill Wheaton, present.
Emil Dahlquist?
Emil Dahlquist, present.
Beth Herr?
Beth Herr, present.
Rick Mitchell?
Present.
Matt Hamill?
Present.
And Marnie Crouch, present. So I'd like to take this opportunity this evening just to do a little catch-up work with respect to the draft overlay district that the planning board has been working on. I think that I would like to hear from Jonathan and Emil about their progress with respect to some of the design elements that are components of this draft overlay district. And then I can report that John Witten has had an opportunity to go through the draft overlay district, and he has provided me with a red line version. And I have reviewed that red line version, and many of his suggestions are very well founded. However, there are some where he indicated that discussions would be warranted. So with his expertise in the matter of municipal law and his experience going through zoning bylaws, some of his comments and questions deserve a more thorough discussion than can be had simply by doing a red line version. So I'm hoping to speak with him as soon as possible. He is on vacation, and as everyone knows, this is the time of year when schedules get real hectic, and coordinating meetings and that type of thing is more difficult. But as soon as I can speak with him and get some clarification as to his points, and vice versa, he can get clarification from me as to why certain elements are in this draft overlay district. I can incorporate all the elements that he is suggesting and provide another draft, not just to the planning board, but to the abutters and any members of the public who are interested. But having said that, I think that the overall structure of the bylaw is in a good place. The concept is being fleshed out and is becoming much clearer. And I think the real work now falls to Emil and Jonathan to finalize their illustrative plans and guide the planning board with respect to the design standards and some of the more technical aspect of the zoning bylaw. Again, I did circulate, or I asked Patrick to circulate to you an abbreviated version of the draft overlay district where I took out a lot of the design elements, and the purpose of that exercise was to demonstrate that under this draft zoning bylaw, a developer has two options. They can use the illustrative plans that Jonathan and Emil have prepared, and that will provide them with an abbreviated special permitting process. Certain elements are deemed satisfied, and certain findings will be deemed satisfied as well. But if a developer elects not to use an illustrative plan, the developer can come forward with a concept plan, and with the concept plan, there will be some additional requirements. But there is no intention to prevent that kind of flexibility that's embedded in this draft as it's now in circulation. So does anyone have any questions before I turn this over to Emil? So if anybody has questions or any comments about the overlay district, it would be a good opportunity to bring them forward, and then we can hear from Emil. Bill?
I'm not quite sure whether the proposal that was given to us at the last meeting by the Theological Seminary to repurpose the set of apartment dormitories into apartments, whether that would fit within the concept plan, should they wish to go ahead and do that, or whether that would be a new concept plan that would require a special permit.
Well, actually, the reuse of those dormitory buildings is as of right. If you may recall, one of the things that John Whitten explained early on was that if the underlying R1B zoning is eliminated, which under this draft overlay district it is, then in order to comply with the Massachusetts zoning laws, there has to
Something
be as of
And
right.
repurposing the buildings would satisfy
So the reuse of
that.
those dormitories would be as of right. Of
Okay,
course,
so
it
that-
would be subject to site plan review, obviously.
Right, so
because-
that we're in a position to respond to the Theological Seminary, that why we would rather go ahead with a whole plan for the entire hill, that their proposal can in fact be accommodated
That-
within this bylaw.
That is my belief, but we're going to
We
really.
should make that clear to them, so they,
Well, and we can also defer that, but I think the intention here is to keep working toward getting the overlay district in such form that we can present it to the public and see how it fares at town meeting in November.
So Marty, I think to further Bill's point, I think part of the proposal from the seminary wasn't only just to allow for the as-of-right use of the apartments, but maybe limit the scope of this effort to that level of the project so that it was an easier thing for the town to digest and potentially approve. Our concern was by parsing it out, it's piecemealing the project and maybe doesn't end up with the whole. So I think we left the meeting, my understanding where we left it was with kind of the two options, whether to limit the scope of this effort towards to allow the reuse of those apartments or the renovation thereof under a special permit, or to lump it together as part of the whole, which
Well,
is
at
what's.
this-
right, but they're not mutually exclusive.
They're not,
They're not.
but the concern is that if you put it under the whole, is that because it includes all these other things which are likely or unlikely or potential, that the town may not accept them.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
conversely, I think that you can make the argument that if we did this piecemeal and just addressed the dormitories, the town wouldn't accept that because we've been working for over 9 months to do a comprehensive plan for this property, and that the town and the seminary engaged Abramson and Associates to look at this site as a whole, and that at least at this juncture, I think that the consensus is, at least for now, to proceed with the overlay district that we have on the table and just kind of see how things evolve over time. But I don't really accept the argument that the town would be more favorable to dealing with just the reuse of the apartments and not the entire site, given the amount of effort that the planning board has put into this endeavor. We've had 2 meetings at the library. We will undoubtedly have more at the community center the farther along we go. But my review of the Zoning Board of Appeals minutes when Harbor Light was before the ZBA for a change of use and a variance was that the abutters in particular did not want to see just isolated parsing out of this property. They wanted to see a comprehensive plan. And so I think that the argument cuts both ways. So I think that right now, our goal should be to get this in the best form possible, using John Whitten's expertise to clarify it and get it in as the best shape we can, and then if we have to, we'll address those things at a later time.
I would like to add that with the knowledge that there is an interest and desire to potentially have the dorms be the first piece up for development, that there are ways that we can refine and clarify the bylaw and the maps in such a way that it makes that process clear and streamlined.
Sure, yeah. Again, I
And
wasn't
that's in
proposing
the
one or the
details.
other.
That's
I
in the
was
details.
Acknowledging
If I can-
that was a
If I
decision.
can just comment, I think knowing what the final product is going to be on the site is useful and important, I think, for the folks when they go and vote on this. How it's parceled out is up to Gordon Conwell.
Yeah,
And we are working on that, how best to separate them, if you will, and how to write that and incorporate that into the code so it's pretty clear. That's what the struggle is or the challenge is right now. That's what we're going through. We don't have a solution at this point. We have a pretty good idea how it should go, but we have to kind of try it out, and that's part of the design process now.
it's good we acknowledge that as a goal. 'Cause
Yeah.
Then we can
Right.
focus on
And I
doing
think
that.
we have to be mindful that the seminary did carve off 19 acres, and we had the lots on Bridge Street. And so, to carve off another piece, that does raise a specter of kind of piecemeal sales. So I think that from the planning boards, especially my point of view, and I believe others in town and even the select board think that given our involvement with Abramson and Associates and the work we've put into it, looking at the site as a whole really does make sense. Because although the seminary has engaged in a right-sizing exercise, and at this juncture is indicating that it, in all likelihood, will sell the property, it's also not ruled out accepting an offer for all or a portion of the property.
Sure,
So we have to look at this from the town's perspective and what's good planning.
Sure.
Because we really, in a sense, won't know what's going to happen with the site until this overlay district it has its trial run. Does anyone else want to add anything? Rick, do you have anything to add? Okay. So, Emil?
Thank you, Marty.
Oh, and just, I apologize. I
Yeah.
just want to make one other observation. In that abbreviated version of the bylaw I gave you, I also indicated where I obtained some of the provisions. So if it was from the senior housing bylaw, I indicated that. If it was from the open space and farmland preservation development bylaw, I indicated that. So a lot of the provisions in the bylaw are not sui generis. They are culled from our existing zoning bylaw. Okay, sorry.
Thanks. I apologize to the public for not having slides for this show, unless, Pat, you can bring up the last PowerPoint that shows the map and some of the site plans, the illustrative plans.
It's on the planning board's
Planning board
webpage.
website.
Is that
But I'll-
the low, medium, and high?
No, this was Plan A, B, C1, and C2. Those were the last four that we looked at, and we want to talk a little bit about that at the beginning. But I'll start off with the, what we refer to as a Browns Hill zoning map. I think we're going to change the name of that based on what John Whitten was suggesting, maybe calling it a planned district, Browns Hill Planned District map. But what we're looking at now is how best to separate EF, A and B, and C and D in a manner that retains the districts as they're laid out on this district map, this illustrative plan map that we have. And hopefully Pat can bring that up on the screen. But so the idea would be to designate those as lots within a district, and that we're trying to figure out a way to do that as a first step, but retain all of the aspects of the individual districts as they would, all the design standards that would be part of those, each one of the districts. So as I say, that's the challenge now, and we're going through that. In addition to the illustrative plans, we're working on the descriptions of the planned districts. We're updating those with dwelling unit numbers, gross square footage, building size, actually, that was something that is required apparently. So square footages, as well as all of the form standards, the building placement, the lot and block standards, heights, building heights, parking locations, and so forth, for each one of the districts. So we're proceeding along, getting those in the charts and onto documents at this stage to submit. Hopefully, we'll have this by next Tuesday to get this information for the board to kind of start to review. This is fairly complicated, so we're going to have to go through that. But that's moving along. But there is something on the plans that I would like to talk about, in that we had sort of narrowed it down to basically two options on the top of the hill, on Browns Hill itself. One was reuse of the existing buildings and expansion of the existing buildings for commercial use primarily. The other option on the top of the hill was the other illustrative plan was a series of duplex houses, about 2,600 square feet each, and there were 46 total units on top of the hill. That was the other alternative plan for the top of the hill. On the bottom of the hill, we actually had three different scenarios that were going on the illustrative plan, and I'd like to ask the board if we could eliminate one of them, but the three were on Plan C1, which was the Central Stables District complex of townhouses. Now, that's consistent in both of those, all three of those potential layouts down at the central part of the campus. And there's a town green there. There's buildings placed around that. No commercial development there, with the possible exception of the stables, if that happens in the future, and a development then around dormitories E and F. So that's one concept. The other one is to remove some of the duplex housing in that central district and put in congregate housing or senior serviced housing, somewhere in the order of 50,000 square feet, 80 beds in that area. So that would be an option. The third one was what we had referred to initially as the low intensity, and that had a series of about 18 or so the duplex houses that were similar to the Boulders project. And our thinking was, rather than try to write standards for all these options, to eliminate the Boulder standards, so that could still occur at the top of the hill. That would be strictly residential at the top of Browns Hill, but to eliminate the optional low-intensity housing on the bottom of the hill. So we would stay with the town green and the multiplex housing down there. So if we do get the pictures, we can show those in more detail. So that is something we'd like to sort of boil it down to two options on the bottom, two on the top, and then write the standards, the design standards to support both of those build-outs.
Do you
Yeah.
mind if I just add a
Yeah.
comment on that? Part of the rationale for that was, number one, that Boulders option at in the central campus was sort of the least dense, least advantageous kind of development, the least beneficial to either the town or the seminary, and really didn't have any better quality open space than some of the more financially advantageous designs. And then the second thing was with kind of the Boulders theme at the top of the hill and at the bottom of the hill, it ended up that you didn't really have much variety of housing types, which is one of the missions in the master plan and in the zoning bylaws, to make sure that there's a variety of housing types. So it just by keeping that third option in the central campus, there just seemed to be a number of reasons why it was not advantageous in the big picture, if that makes any sense. Does that, did I
Yeah,
clarify
thanks.
that all?
Yeah.
So to assure variety of housing types and also to eliminate an option that didn't have much financial benefit and really didn't have an additional quality of open space. In other words, you were getting less money and no better open space. Why not get just as good open space and have more benefit for the town, if that makes sense?
Yeah, because initially that idea was to have all of the Boulders housing as the low-intensity development, including in front of the Stables unit. But what we liked was the townhouse because it was a different housing option, a different type of housing, could be rental, could be whatever, but a more distinctive kind of housing there. And then we had the Boulders attached to it, but the Boulders concept was reduced down to 20 or so units down there. So we thought it would be a more cohesive kind of development if the denser townhouses were supported then in the rest of the central area by the multiplex housing around a town green. So that we kind of agreed on that as an alternative. Again, because we're coming to the point where we have to create the form standards for everything that we're suggesting here in the illustrative plan, it would be just better to have that.
When you say advantageous to the town in terms of taxes, if you build twice as many units, but they're smaller and less valuable, it's not clear that the tax revenue from those units is going to be higher than if you built half as many units at a higher standard, say, of the Boulders. So I'm not sure I would agree that the town would be fiscally better off with twice as many units, half as small, basically. I mean, that's the kind of trade-off that you're talking about.
Well, with the residential.
I'm pretty sure that the abutters would prefer to have less than more,
Yeah.
but that's another consideration.
Well, I'll just make an observation, is that there is a need for a variety of housing types in Hamilton, so that's clear. And so the trade-off, is something that's a bit nebulous. I mean, we really, it would be hard to judge that. I mean, townhouses can be super nice and expensive, so it's not as if it would be detrimental. But there is, as I said, an incentive to have a variety of housing type choices for people. But the other thing is that there will be the same level of open space and amenities. So it isn't as if we're losing something. And one of the aspects of this overlay district is that we want to provide perimeter buffers for the abutters so that whatever development occurs on that site is appropriately integrated into that community in a way that will be beneficial to them. So I think that's a consideration that we shouldn't lose sight of, is that this development would be occurring in a portion of the campus that's probably the least visible to all the abutters and even the public just driving by.
I would also like to remind the board that just because the illustrative plan favors that doesn't mean that a developer can't come in and propose the entire site full of Boulders duplexes. It doesn't prevent that, and then it's up to the board or the town to say whether they support that or don't support that. So it doesn't preclude that, it just favors, it sets up the illustrative plans as favoring the priorities indicated in the master plan and the existing bylaws. That's all.
And our principles that we set forth.
Yeah.
And that really is something to remember, is that these illustrative plans can be used and can provide a really simplified path for a developer, but they're not mandatory. Indeed, a developer could come in, look at the illustrative plans and say, wow, those are some good ideas, but I think I'll do instead of X, I'll do Y. And there's no reason to believe that a developer couldn't come up with something really creative and attractive and beneficial. We won't make the assumption that a concept plan is a bad plan.
So that's the task anyway. We're trying to work toward next Tuesday to introduce some information in the charts and some numerical quantities on the form standards. So that will be the goal of what we're trying to accomplish by Tuesday. And
So can you
have
talk-
those tables available.
Can you talk a little bit about the standards that you're trying to develop?
Yeah, they're, the form standards, again, a lot of them are familiar to us already. Things like setbacks, things like building heights, things like, square footages and so forth of buildings. A lot of that's already part of our current bylaw, so those would be employed here. But to continue with the form part of it, because that's the key here for predictability. That what we're also going to include is where do the buildings get placed on the site? And that's important because of what the building site does in conjunction with the road and the sidewalk and all of that. That's where you want to see a building line, building wall on that side to be consistent. Current codes would say you have a minimum, you can't be any closer than 35 feet or something like that from the street line to your building line. So it means that you could push your house back 100 feet if you had the lot. But what we're looking for in a very tight, compact development is a very tight pattern of housing configuration. So we have a build-to line, or at least a very narrow setback in the front yard for buildings to reinforce that street line in relation to the street and the sidewalk. That's the basic thing for that front setback. Buildings will be sized. What's important is not to allow a building to be too large there, any larger than any other building on the site, including the Mandel house. In fact, you're trying to be smaller than that in scale, and yet still accommodate a couple of dwelling units. And so the idea, again, is rather than wind up with a large apartment building there on the site, to do the individual units that are spaced apart at, say 75 to 100 feet max apart. So you have narrow side yards, you have a nice street wall, and make it a more walkable community. And that's really what the idea here is in terms of developing those tight standards. When you get something very compact, you want to kind of be sure you have some control of where things occur on that site. So again, building heights, not allow anything more than 2.5 stories in certain areas. Other areas we can go higher, like in the top of the hill. But those are some of the standards. So we have, the actual one is the, we're going to have the residential density in each one of these districts. We'll have, what the housing build-out is going to be in each one of those, what the density is in dwelling units per acre. This would be new construction, not rebuilding the dormitories. So he's going to start to establish upper limits in terms of what you can build there. And then by building sizes, and then total gross square footage is another way to control kind of the ultimate build-out. So the idea, again, is to create predictability. When these illustrative plans were created, we had this all in mind and how to do it, and wanted to build something that would conform to the possibilities that we felt in that area were the best possible arrangements. We had a couple of assumptions. All the existing buildings would stay and all the roads would stay. We couldn't assume that those would be eliminated. We didn't want to do that, take those buildings down and say, if we had all the options, we could then get rid of that, those which could be considered as constraints on the site to do something different. A developer can come in and do anything they want. They can take all the buildings down and come up with their own concept plan. And not to say it wouldn't be a great plan either. So they might do that, but what we are trying to do is work with what the owner has there in place, buildings and roads and so forth, and add to it in a way that brings it all together, makes it more cohesive, and makes it a walkable with great open space for
Could I
the
just
people who live there.
interject and
Yeah.
remind everyone, I don't think Pat's been able to find your PowerPoint, but
I
you
have the
should.
PowerPoint, I just can't log into the meeting for some
Oh.
reason.
You showed pictures, I believe, of Annisquam and different communities, so you can think of towns that you really like. And Newburyport comes to mind, where you have these historic houses that they front the street at the same setback. And then just think of Bay Road, where we have a gas station, and then we'll have a building that's close to the street, and then we have buildings that sit back from the street, and you have parking lots in front of the buildings, and it's real haphazard. And visually, it's not particularly appealing. And in terms of a neighborhood, a walkable neighborhood, it's not appealing either. So, I mean, when we think about downtown revitalization, or the one thing you never want to see is to have the parking in the front of the building. Well, Cumberland Farms is a prime example of what you would never want to see, but still, you do have that kind of mishmash of buildings with different sizes and different frontages. And so I think what Emil and Jonathan are trying to depict here are neighborhoods where people would want to live.
Question?
Yeah.
So, within these districts, is there a maximum square footage of build-out?
That's something we as a board have to decide on. What we're going to do is give you all the numbers of what are on the illustrative plans. The board will then decide. And that was this, from the beginning, we were trying to come up with, well, what is the right intensity of development? And that's information that's hard to come by. It was not part of what the consultants dealt with at all. So that's why we had the separate meetings with the public, to try to get a better feel of that. And the consensus, I think, was that from the abutters, they like it the way it is. They don't want to see too much development there. They prefer residential to most. People in other parts of the town think a little differently about it, that site, but
So question, when would we have that discussion in terms of maximum square footage? Is this when?
we have to do it.
you completed your preferred illustrative plan?
Well, you've already seen it, the preferred illustrative plans. We're not going to change them very much. We'd like to eliminate one scenario in the central part of
Right.
the campus. But the illustrative plans are as they will be, not any more elaborate than that. But what we are going to fill out are these tables and these forms, because that becomes then a part, it gets inserted into the code. And Marty has indicated in her draft, insert table 1 or insert table 2 or 5 or whatever. And that's where we'll start to insert some of these standards that pertain to particular districts. So a district at the bottom of the hill isn't going to be the same as the Browns Hill district at the top, in terms of setbacks, in terms of building heights. And
So I'm a little confused, because you said the square footage is already defined in the illustrative plans that we've seen.
Yeah.
But the board needs to determine whether in fact that are square footage.
we have to accept it as a board.
So
It's not-
I can clarify probably here.
Yeah.
So the illustrative plans are based on very specific assumptions about building sizes, building heights, building square footages, and maximum square footages in each area. And that's what the illustrative plans represent, but they have no numbers attached to them. They're just diagrams. So the task is to take that diagram that you can see, and you may or may not like, the configuration, but you can see the configuration, what it results in as a map, to convert that into a set of metrics that then a developer can follow. So it's just to convert what's in the diagram into numbers.
Well,
So
that's
it's not, it doesn't change. So then what you're doing is you're looking at, okay, I see the map makes sense, I like it, or I accept it, or I want to modify it. Then you see it converted in the same thing, the same analysis converted into numbers. And you say, okay, now I see it converted into numbers. I still like it or I don't like it, and that would be the commentary.
And what do those numbers represent?
They represent
Dwelling unit
turning-
sizes. Yeah.
They represent turning that diagram, diagram A, diagram B, C1, C2, turning those into max minimum setbacks, maximum building square footage, maximum building height, maximum distance apart. So it turns the diagram into numbers.
Right, so that's what I'm trying to determine when we get to, as Emil referred to, is the board decide what the maximum square footage is within each district. Because you currently have a maximum within the current illustrative plans, right?
Yep.
Okay, so it's almost predetermined that that's the maximum.
Yeah, unless the board looked at it and said, we want to modify that, it's too much or it's too little, and then we'd go back and modify the plan.
No, okay. I'm just want to understand how that works, because my guess is, in that district, if a developer comes in and says, well, I don't like the illustrative plan, the maximum square footage or units within that district is probably going to be the planning board's line of decision-making in terms of, well, you're exceeding the illustrative plan, we don't like it.
Yeah, and then you have a visual to compare it to.
Right.
No.
But could I just interject, though? And so there will be, what Emil and Jonathan are talking about are the form, what did you call them specifically? The form
Form
standards?
standards, yeah.
But we will have, there's a table 6 that has yet to be developed that will have dimensional standards for the concept plan that are very much analogous to the table that's set forth in the senior housing.
No, I get that. This is a bigger sort of quantitative, I'm thinking longer term, once the planning board puts its imprint on what it thinks in an illustrative plan, what that is acceptable, then that becomes the standard by which anything else gets judged.
Well, there'll be another dimensional standards that would be applicable to the concept plan.
The short answer is yes. It gives you a reference
But it
point.
will be a reference point.
Yes, it is a reference point, and that's part of its purpose. It's a benchmark.
Right. No, I get it. I'm just, I'm trying
Yeah.
to understand the correlation.
Yeah, it's a new way to do it, yeah.
How this becomes imprinted, and then it becomes a de facto standard for any other alternative.
Yeah, that you could deviate from, but you have a reference point.
Right.
Right.
And this is the one thing, though, that Abramson and Associates didn't do, as Emil pointed out. They didn't determine what the appropriate intensity of development is,
Nor could they.
nor could they. And the public has a vested interest in it, but it's our job to do that. That's what we're
I
going to
get
be
it. I'm
struggling with,
just
on
trying
August 1st and August 15th. And that's the hard part of our job, is to figure out what exactly those metrics should be.
No, I'm fully cognizant of that, and I want to know what the impact of those standards are as it relates to any future potential under a concept plan.
But that's all subject to our discussion.
Yeah, and it also is for the benefit of the seminary, so they can see what quantities
Oh, no, I
are.
get the benefit.
or-
I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking other alternatives.
Yeah.
If some developer comes in and said, well, I have a different idea, then that becomes, the illustrative plan is the benchmark, essentially.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, but conversely, if a developer came in and wanted to build something absolutely mammoth, like an Amazon warehouse, I
Right.
don't think it'd get to first base. So, I mean, there's a balancing here.
Not allowed under this
No,
bylaw,
I
so.
understand that. I'm exaggerating, but this will be, a very critical part of our deliberations, but it's something that
Oh,
we
look.
actually have to do.
That
Yeah, thank you.
was it?
That's,
That was my goal, to get done before the meeting's over.
This essentially will stay intact, but the struggle now is to, or not struggle, but the next challenge is to identify how the dormitories in the SD district or lower left, A and B, C and D, E and F, could possibly be lotted so that they would fit within the districts where they're assigned. It'd be a stipulation that lot lines cannot straddle district lines, so we'd have to create something there that would work out, and we've kind of roughed out something that would really work. There's some discussion about the UE area too, that how best to treat that. I thought John Whitten has offered some interesting information on that we need to kind of incorporate. But that map will stay essentially the same. Pat, can you advance that one?
Sure.
You know, I would think that if it's really to
Going
be
to
an
illustrative
illustrative plan, we should show the broadest range of alternatives.
Yeah.
So rather than eliminating the low density and showing just, for the want of better words, a high density and a medium density, we should show a high density and a low density so that townspeople don't think we're kind of wired into one scheme of things, that there's a broader range of options. And so I guess my suggestion would be not to cut out that third, but maybe to cut out the middle, so you have the full range of a more dense development of the middle, as opposed to a less dense development of the middle. If it's to be illustrative of the range of things that are possible.
Marnie, I'm sorry, what time did we want to get to the exec session?
About eight
About
o'clock, but
eight,
that's
okay.
not a hard and fast rule. I do want to talk about minutes, though, so.
Sure.
Yeah, I can just wrap up here.
Yes,
If I can.
and I think that to your point, Bill, I think what we have here, and it's a bit unspoken, is the level of effort that's required to do this work.
No, I get that.
We're really asking Jonathan and Emil to do Olympic caliber weightlifting, and so for each of these illustrative plans, it's just one more level of work, Bill. So I think that's the issue here, that
So logistical question, Amor was indicating that by next Tuesday, they'll have the
We're
dimensional, they'll have the.
Shooting for the form standards to be in place for review.
So those will be in tables?
Yes.
Okay. So this.
Now, this will not be something decided at that meeting. People are going to have to
No, I get it.
consume it, and,
I get it.
yeah.
And this gets to all the hard work that everybody's put into this, and I really want to be able to read it as a whole, because it's so interactive.
Yeah.
Because when I read this, I can't, because
Yeah.
it's referencing things that aren't there. So my question is, and this is a logistics question and timing question, is when do you think that we will have a bylaw that will incorporate all the referenced documents, so that as a reader, I can read through and it's giving me references to sections, and I'm going,
Yeah, but it's,
I can't get
be nice to have. What I can do now is just insert these as a PDF, all these charts.
No.
I can do that, but I wanted to insert something that was actually manipulable, so
No,
I
I
can
get
actually
that.
change it.
I'm not.
What I think, excuse me, Rick, what I think may happen is this draft is going to evolve in a way to make it more readable in terms of, or make a stronger distinction between option A and option B. Option A being the illustrative plan procedure, B being something else.
Yeah, I think that would, that
That,
certainly would be.
we need to improve that, I think. I think Marty would agree with that. And
Yeah, and the other thing is, and it's maybe my ignorance, I'm reading, this is like a Swiss watch, it has so many moving parts. And it's referencing other bylaws in here, sections of bylaws. Maybe when we get down to the 5-yard line, is that we can put in appendices that has those bylaws, or so that as a reader's going, well, it's referencing section 9.1.2.3, which is not in the overlay district bylaw, but it's referencing another one. A reader can look at it and say, oh, okay, let me go to the appendix, and I can understand how that impacts that overall thing, because and this is not a critique, this is just a reader's attempt.
Right, I know you want to have everything all in one place, and of course, that's the difficulty. And so, of course, our
To the
zoning.
degree that we can.
Yes, our zoning bylaw is on the planning board's webpage, but that certainly.
Right. But I have to keep going
Yeah.
from when I read
Yeah.
one section to another.
Well, bear in mind that if we put all the attachments in place, the document gets thicker, thicker.
That's,
But anyhow,
that's-
I think when we actually have a presentation for the public, having that information in an appendix is certainly not a bad idea.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
because I really hope that people understand that this bylaw, while it's a bit of a hybrid and has some novel features, it's not from left field or Mars.
No, I get it.
It's
No, no,
really
you-
tried to use what townspeople are familiar with and then incorporate some really fabulous ideas from other communities that have used this form-based approach and very successfully. And they've done so in Massachusetts, and they've done so in all parts of the country, that in Montana, in California, in South Carolina, and all sorts of places that are really wonderful examples of good planning. So it is a good idea to have as much information attached as possible. But because we're a planning board and we have to be transparent, when we draft a document, it evolves, and we're trying to finish it in plain sight. And in a normal world, you would finish the document, put your attachments there, and throw it out, and try not to negotiate all its components in public. But that's what we have to do. And that's what we'll be doing.
Speaking of the public, should we turn it over? We got just a few minutes left, probably.
Yeah,
If you want to get to the minutes and do the
Yeah,
thing. And everything.
some questions
They have their
from,
hand raised.
Yeah.
some questions from the public, and help me here, because I apologize, I'm not able to see the hands raised.
Mike Gordon has requested to speak. He should be allowed,
Okay?
although he's had his hand up for a while. Mike, you're on mute if you're trying to speak. No,
Anyone else have their hand up?
he gave up. That was the only hand up from the Zoom members.
Do any of our attendees?
Pat,
Dave
why don't you-
Dashkin.
Hold on one second. Why don't you take his hand down, so if he left the computer, he knows that we tried to get him?
Sure.
And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
he can put his hand up again?
Yeah, okay.
Dave Dashkin, 215 Woodbury Street. When you make up these details, can we get an estimate of how much surface area, not just the square footage of total in the building, but the surface square footage, and then all hardscape, like, all sidewalks, all roadways, all parking lots, so we have a real assessment of how much greenery is left on the site. I think it's very little for some of the size densities that are being proposed. And I would hope that your drawings, your illustrative drawings, something illustrious about them, they would reflect those numbers, so that people have not this fanciful drawing, still sketch and the like, but they know what you're talking about. So have you accommodated, bikeways, walkways? What size walkways are we talking about? Are they adequate for people, pushing somebody in a wheelchair and somebody passing, or are they just a little narrow 3-foot path? So I think you can make an assessment of how much square footage of the ground surface area is being covered with hardscape. It should be part of your numbers.
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Anyone else?
So will that happen? I didn't hear an answer.
I would have to defer to the, to Emil, as he's probably the only
Well,
planning
I
board
would-
member who could actually make that calculation. I know I can't. But I will tell you that in our draft overlay district, we have provided, we've incorporated provisions to address landscaping of all parking lots, lighting, and all those types of things.
It's
That,
trying to put numbers to these things, so you actually have a hard number as to how much, because it actually goes to the whole business of trying to associate lot lines with the existing apartment buildings, which is, and then I guess, from the chair, which of these districts gets to claim the wetlands as part of their open space, or how's that being, is that being handled as an aggregate, that everybody gets to claim a part of it? And
no, the-
don't count that in terms of saying, look at all this open space that we've maintained.
Yeah, the wetlands area is designated as a natural area, so it doesn't go to any of the one parcels, so it's not going to be, those districts are not going to be diluted, if you, so to speak, with wetlands area. So that's itemized separately, as are steep slopes. They're taken off the table in terms of the numbers. But to get back to your looking for square footage of pavement, what I think we can do is, and intend to do, is certainly show a profile of the street width, what the travel lanes are, the parking areas, the strip for trees, street trees, sidewalks, and so forth, and then the, where the property line would be on the side of the street. We're going to do all the lots. We're going to try to lot the particular parts of the area. Our parking is all in the rear of the building, so there'd be a rear alley that services to get the cars and driveways off the off the frontage part of the buildings. So they'll all be in the rear, and they'll be connected with an alleyway in the back that provides garages, either separate garages or attached in the house itself. So we have that that variety. But in actually coming up with square footage, I don't know that, I mean, we're not developers. We're not doing a plan to be built. This is a conceptual plan that I think that, frankly, is a step too far for what you really need. That would be valuable to the, and I'm usually very particular about how much information to look at to evaluate a project, but that seems, we could throw a number at it, but you would never know it's even close. I mean,
I think the important thing is our bylaws stipulate that there is a maximum to impervious when a project is developed. So there is a maximum.
there is a maximum, yeah.
And then the other piece is that there is a stormwater management requirement that is really outside of this bylaw, you know, that really manages pervious versus impervious area and how the water moves across it, so.
and in this draft bylaw, there's an application process, so any developer has to come in with architectural plans and whatnot. The illustrative plans are illustrative. They're not plans that you could take to an actual builder and say, build from these plans. So the whole application process requires a sophisticated approach to this. So those provisions are in the draft overlay district. And so if someone came in and there was an egregious amount of impervious surface or whatnot, that would be scrutinized. So our intention here is not to have to pave paradise with a parking lot. So I think that, on the contrary, it's to create very livable neighborhoods where the roads and particularly garages and whatnot are screened from public view to the extent possible.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but this will be coming up next board meeting, is these illustrative plans and all the plans that have been looked at are based on sort of composite base plans, none of which represent definitive instrument surveys, which is where an engineer or an architect would need to start their work with an up-to-date instrument survey of that entire lot with all its topography and all its existing elements. So these are diagrams. So there will be actually a disclaimer on these drawings that say these are based on composite drawings. It'll attribute what composite drawings they're based on, and that all future development would be based on, first step, an instrument survey of the whole site. Now, if Gordon Conwell wanted to pay for an instrument survey, then you've got a different starting point. But our starting point is the best information that we have in hand without commissioning and paying for and waiting for an instrument survey.
All right, at this juncture, I don't know if we've answered your question satisfactorily, but in any event, the kind of information that you're requesting would not actually be part of a zoning bylaw itself, other than to have maybe some controls on the amount of hardscape. But the whole intention here was to have to maintain the campus feel to some extent, and so certainly I don't think anyone here on this planning board wants to see a lot of pavement on that site, except what's necessary for traffic safety and that type of thing. So at this juncture, absent any other questions, I think I have to turn the meeting over to some board business. So thank you for attending. I'm sure no one's really interested in our minutes from 2022. So thank you for coming. Do you think Robin is locked out?
Robin was here.
Oh, okay, I didn't see her.
Robin is here.
She is here, okay. Okay, so let's turn to minutes. Did anyone have an opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes. Do you want to do them one by one? Or?
Well,
I only have one comment on all of them, so
okay, so
there's not a lot for me, anyway.
So, do you have them in writing or just verbally? Because I can write them down and
August 30 minutes,
okay,
2022, page 6.
yep,
Bottom paragraph, first line, the last word in that line is, reference is from Randall Harrington. Harrington is not right, it's Arend, A-R-E-N-D-T. That's the
Okay.
reference. Right here, Harrington
Oh,
is
it's-
incorrect.
it should be, could you spell that?
Arend,
A-
A-R-E-N-D-T.
Okay,
That's it.
that's it? Okay. I prepared those minutes, so I can actually make that correction. I had reviewed the minutes from January 3rd, January 17th, February 7th, February 23rd, and March 7th. And so I sent Patrick and Joan Delamore a memo where I made, believe me when I say this, relatively minor corrections. So the one thing that I did ask her to do, and I don't know if she will do it, is to include the HTTP address so that if members of the public are reading the minutes, they can find where the YouTube video can be found. So that was one of the generalized comments that I had, and just some other minor double checking on terms of capitalization and whatnot. But I addressed the minutes from the last meeting, and I also included in that memo the minutes from May 9th and May 16th. So they're all done. And then Emil had a correction to the minutes from April 30th, 2022. I had reviewed the minutes from September 20th and October 11th quite a number of months ago and found them as Word documents on my computer. So I'm 3/4 away through the September 20th meeting minutes, and from October 11th, I think I could probably just skim through them. Did anyone have any problems with those minutes?
October 11th is a fairly dense set of minutes.
Yep.
It'd be handy to spell my name correctly, consistently.
Oh, your name was spelled wrong throughout.
Yeah, so anyway,
Poor Jonathan.
minor detail. And here and there were some sort of factual inaccuracies. They're minor, but I just haven't waded through it completely.
Well,
Well, I could hit one or two right now, and we could fix my name and call it a day, but
or you could send whatever corrections you might have to me, and I can go ahead and make them because I have them on my computer.
okay.
I don't think Joan would have a
They're
problem.
they're minor. They're like numbers that are misquoted.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the content is there.
Yeah, if you send them to me, then we can approve the minutes from, I think we can approve the minutes from August 30th with the correction that Emil made. I think we should defer approval of the minutes from September 20th and October 11th to August 1st. And then we can approve, subject to correction, all the other minutes. So I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from January 3rd, 2023, January 17th, 2023, February 7th, 2023, February 23rd, 2023, and March 7th, 2023, as well as May 9th, 2023, May 16th, 2023, and August 30th, 2022.
So moved.
So moved.
Do I have
Second?
you can be a second. When I call your name, would you please indicate whether you assent to the motion? Pat Norton,
Pat Norton, aye.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist.
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth, you can vote with respect to the minutes except for August 30th.
Okay.
Oh, well, I'm not sure you were at all those meetings.
Right, because I wasn't elected until April.
Right. Well, you've missed several meetings,
Oh,
so,
yeah.
yeah, so we'll just assume
So
you're
I for-
abstaining.
Yeah, okay,
Can we do that?
that's great.
Rick Mitchell
Aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. So,
Did you say March 7?
yeah,
I was not at that meeting, so
okay, I
I have
think-
to recuse myself.
okay. So the motion,
not,
the motion
abstain.
passes with,
Yeah.
so we've taken care of that, and I'll make sure we're, got this all squared away. Okay. Minutes off the agenda. So at this juncture, as chair, I find that pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, that it's appropriate for the planning board to go into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, because it would be detrimental, it would have a detrimental effect on litigation if we were to continue in an open meeting, and I so declare as chair. So at this juncture, we will go into executive session.
Mark, do you want to indicate which piece of that involves?
Oh, and this, thank you, Robin. This involves litigation by Chabaco Hill Capital Partners LLC against the planning board. One case is pending in the Massachusetts Land Court. number 22 miscellaneous 000591, and the other involving the stormwater management permit, which was denied, which is pending in the Massachusetts Superior Court, case number 2277 CV01137.
So the other thing is, you might want to indicate that we're not returning to public session.
And we will not be returning to public session, so I will be entertaining a motion to adjourn at the conclusion of the executive session. But for members of the public, we will now be off air.
So,
Well, hold on, so you made your declaration.
Yes.
So now the board has to make a motion to
Oh.
go into executive session consistent with your declaration.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
And a roll call vote, and then.
Yeah, second.
Second.
Roll call vote, so Pat Norton,
Pat Norton, aye?
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Rick Mitchell,
aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye.
Aye.
Is Beth entitled to vote on that? Maybe she is.
Supposed to go into the.
Yeah, Beth, her, aye.